how do we take the enormous amounts of data that we're collecting across all of our channels, across our product, and how do we synthesize that into something actionable from a product and marketing perspective?
Jeremy, excited to chat with you today. To begin, can you share very briefly, 5 seconds, what is Indicative?
Great. So Indicative is a customer analytics platform designed specifically for product and marketing teams to allow them to understand, analyze, and ultimately act on data surrounding the customer journey.
How did you arrive to building this solution? What was the problem you initially saw? And then you're like, we got to solve this.
Bit of a long story. I'll try to give you the short version. The short version, effectively, in a prior company that I had founded and was operating, we wanted to be as data-driven as we possibly could. And we struggled with the notion of how do we take the enormous amounts of data that we're collecting across all of our channels, across our product, and how do we synthesize that into something actionable from a product and marketing perspective. Long story short, we looked at products in market, and nothing really satisfied our use cases. And we decided to roll something ourselves internally. And I think, like a lot of products, end up being born out of necessity. And so we effectively spun out Indicative from another startup, and then began building the customer analytics platform that we wanted.
The best use cases for sure come out of a problem that you initially see. So basically data analytics turning into actionable tactics. Is that kind of the nuts and bolts? How do you then, can you give a use case of that in action for a company?
Absolutely. So it's even more complicated than that. So when you think about this notion of data, there is an ever-growing amount that we're generating. As a society, as a company, the ability for us to generate data has increased through the use of new channels, new touch points with customers. That generates data, but harnessing that information is really difficult. So from a traditional sense, if you're storing this data in a data warehouse, synthesizing that into something actionable is very hard because the customer journey analytics, or typically time series analytics, isn't the kind of thing you can just write a SQL query for. So I'll just state that again. This type of analytics is not something you just whip up a SQL query for. And so the traditional BI tools around understanding customer journey don't really have the ability to answer these questions by themselves. So what does that mean? Historically, the way that's been solved is by having engineers or data scientists, data analysts, write both code and SQL that synthesize this information into analysis that then yields quote unquote insights. What our platform does is does that for you automatically. So our platform is both a visualization tool and an analysis platform. So examples of that would be, if you want to look at, say, simple KPIs like sign up or page views or even purchases, that's very easy to do. But understanding how a sign up or a page view, or even much more sophisticated interactions with your business, open up an email, different nuances of your product, how those actually interact to drive outcomes is really challenging. So maybe a very simple example is, if you're looking at actually, we have a customer who's one of the major insurance companies who sells life insurance. Their onboarding process is very complex because their goal is to provide you with a quote within the first few minutes of using their application. So they have to ask 20 or so very detailed questions. So now they can easily look at how many people start that process. They can look at how many people answer each one of those questions. But understanding the nuances of how people are answering those questions, where they're dropping off, and what are the different influences of the nuance there that contribute to someone ultimately arriving at a quote and then purchasing life insurance for them is really hard. They've used our platform to understand those individual behavioral nuances, the combinations there that lead to greater outcomes, and then take that information and apply it to both how they're changing that onboarding process, but also even how they're acquiring customers, understanding if some channels have a higher efficacy towards this completion goal, as opposed to just people who show up at a landing page.
This quantity of data that's being created is only growing. So companies that have these, this data warehouses you talk about, there's tools that it comes into, whether there's Google Analytics or you have all those different applications, but they don't really help you know what to do with it. And you're saying previously they would have to create their own ways of pulling it out and developing it. Yours is supposed to just simplify that. Sounds like integration is a big thing then into whatever platforms they're already using. Tell me a bit more about the technology. How does it work? How does it seamlessly integrate? How does it make it easier for them?
So it's worthwhile to take a second to talk about how our industry is evolving. So by and large, if you wanted to have a data warehouse, 5, 6, 7 years ago, this was, if you wanted to do that, you'd have to contact IBM and do a multi-million-dollar contract. And as everyone obviously knows, from an infrastructure perspective, the cloud has taken over all of tech. Today, if you want a data warehouse, then literally in the span of this conversation we're having, we could have signed up for AWS or Google Cloud and provisioned a enterprise quality data warehouse. And so in the past, because this technology was inaccessible, many companies in our space, when they collect your data or when you send them your data, they store it in their own proprietary data warehouse. Today, anyone can have a data warehouse, whether you're a two-person startup in a garage or you are the largest of companies. What makes Indicative unique, what makes us special, is that we're the only analytics platform that connects directly to a data warehouse, and therefore alleviating the need to have to duplicate your data into a third party's proprietary store. And secondly, because we automate this type of analysis, like I mentioned earlier, it alleviates the need for product teams to have to depend on data teams in order to quickly iterate with data in their product decisions.
So this living out to a reality of a product manager being able to have access to this, is it just faster execution of, all right, now data's automatically come in, I can make decisions and adjustments now within a week or a month versus what used to take me longer? What's that time change?
Well, I think the effect of this has been that product, by and large, we used to think of it as an art. I have a knack for product. We should do this. I think that's going to work. And I'm speaking a little bit, hyperbole here. What's happened is we now have the ability to harness this data. So product has become much more of a science in and of itself. So how do we apply that? And your question was, what is the timeline? If you acknowledge that we should be using data to drive your product, historically, understanding the nuances of how people are using your product used to be a process that could take multiple days to weeks to reach a single conclusion. Today, and I think the way we believe in this is that you should be able to make many decisions or at least get access to information at your fingertips that helps inform those decisions. And for people who work with data, it's never just there's one answer. Typically, it's you generate an analysis or a chart and you say, that's interesting. And then you say, I want to look at this 10 or 20 different other ways. In other words, rerun that analysis, but tweak it slightly and see if you can look at it from a slightly different angle and help that inform more decisions. And so by providing access to this type of data, this type of analysis at your fingertips means that we can make smarter decisions about our product and our business faster, which I think it's obvious then that can also lead to better outcomes, more success stories, more revenue ultimately for our business.
Where do you see Indicative in the near term, next year or so? Where are you guys headed in the long term, next 5 years?
So I think about sort of the evolution of how we use data. Starting with this notion of having a data warehouse just means that we're able to have this data. There's been an explosion in the CDP space, which means we can now capture more and more data. The first wave of utilizing this data is predominantly around descriptive-based analytics. Show me the counts. Show me, the counts and different dimensions of that data. We're moving towards a place, and where Indicative is focused from an analysis perspective in the future, is while our toolset today provides a lot of the ability to look at it from different angles, you're ultimately searching for those light bulbs, for those insights that allow you to make the decisions. And as it turns out, within our domain of analytics, a lot of the use cases our customers have, regardless of the vertical they're in, all typically fall around increasing engagement, decreasing churn, and how to influence outcomes. And so our goal with our product as we look to the future is to move our tool set from one that provides you with more knobs and dials to get in to come up with your own conclusions, to one where we can actually tell you what the insights are because we know the basic patterns. And so when people come to typical BI tools or customer analytics tools, they go in and they ask those 20 questions to help reach a hypothesis. We know what you want to achieve. Why can't we just tell you exactly what the answer is that you're searching for? And so when we think about sort of the time to value aspect, that's almost what I was alluding to earlier, we're trying to look at how do we get that time to value aspect even shorter?
And when is that reality going to come in where you'll be able to give that analysis and they don't even have to surf through the data?
You know, that's a hard question to answer, right? I don't think there's any product in the market in any space that is able to give you crystal clear, crystal ball predictions on what's going to happen into the future. So I think, you know, I think aspirationally we're all going there. And I think in very narrow domains, there is really interesting stuff going on around making those predictions. But if you want sort of my quick take on at least indicative in our ecosystem, there are bits and pieces where we can do that today. There are bits and pieces where we do that in our platform today. I think sort of the holy grail here is still many years away, unfortunately. You know, when I think about the data ecosystem in and of itself, it's evolving incredibly quickly, which is really exciting. But in terms of the overall evolution, we're still really at the nascent stages. We're just beginning to really harness data in any meaningful way. I think of the opportunity or the value is still very much in front of us rather than where we are today or where we're coming from.
Appreciate the time to share this, Jeremy. For those who want to learn more, definitely check out indicative.com. Have you seen a company using AI, machine learning, or other technology to transform the way we live, work, and do business? Go to uptechreport.com and let us know.